everybody. It's Safi and Marco, dish out on the movies, and today is round 2 of movies that Marco is making me watch that I probably wouldn't want to watch.
Yeah, this is Safi is forced to watch ... Bone Tomahawk, which is a movie I've already reviewed and talked about before. And it's really funny because the story of why I chose this movie just makes you, like, LOL and say, oh, I probably don't want to listen to this reviewer because
well,
what happened...
Go ahead.
We were playing Horror Trivial Pursuit, and there was a question about Bone Tomahawk.
There was 2 questions.
And Safi's like, ew, Bone Tomahawk is gross. I hate Bone Tomahawk. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to watch it.
I've never heard of it in my life.
And then I was like, why don't we put it on, Safi? And you're like, no, it's Christmas.
Yeah, it was Christmas.
And it's like, who cares? Like, just put on Bone Tomahawk. Christmas was canceled this year anyway. So
it was a very COVID Christmas.
And so, like, that's the story, is that Safi was just like, oh, Bone Tomahawk, that sucks.
Well, I didn't say
like,
that at all.
God, Safi, like, stop being prejudiced towards Westerns. Like, you're so prejudiced towards Westerns. This is basically like a Western horror movie. Which is
different.
And that's what attracted me, was that it's like, I don't really like Westerns typically, unless they're, like, unique. Like, the same with, like, war movies.
Yeah.
And so I was really looking forward to watching it just because they said it's a horror Western. I mean, that sounds good.
I liked it.
Really?
It wasn't one of the best movies in the world. It was kind of slow for a while, but it was different. But there's some, and they had some really unique quotes in it. I'll just and Kurt Russell, I'd say he's the main actor in it, and he played the sheriff, and it was just this little tiny town. That was the focus of it, but and then an area of the country where there was these big, like, huge cliffs, and instead of, Native Americans, some kind of Indian tribe, it involved, and they called them troglodytes, and I just don't think in the turn of in the 1800s, they knew the word troglodyte.
Really?
Yeah, really. And but anyway,
why not, Safi? Why not?
What happened was, if anybody's ever seen the movie Jeremiah Johnson, you kind of knew what might happen. They had these bad guys. They killed this family to steal their stuff, and what happens? They hear this weird sound, and they get spooked, and they think somebody's watching them, and they're going after them, and they think it could be Indians or whatever, and so they start running, and they come across this Native American graveyard. Well, if you've ever seen Jeremiah Johnson, once they make this decision to go through a hollow ground where Native American were buried. It's like a cemetery, just it's special. It's set up differently and everything, but it's still a cemetery. They get killed because it's a sacred ground, and that's what these stupid bad guys who were hearing this noise ran through it, and then all of a sudden they get these weird creatures who look like Native Americans, but they were covered in...
They kind of look like you, Safi.
Well, they were covered in this, like, chalk dust that had been wet or something.
It's like you.
And they...
Like, in the middle of the night when you come in here and
What?
You're like, Marco, I need to get a label that I printed out.
In the middle of the night?
Yeah.
At 9 o'clock in the morning is the middle of the night?
Yeah, and then you come in here
No,
and
Marco.
fucking troglodyte wanting your label.
Well, anyway, they're all like, they barely have any clothes on, and they're huge for the most part. Most of them are huge. They're like, I don't know, I say 6'5", and they're really built. They look like they're, I don't know, like they're in sports or something, but, you know, as actors, I mean, they're just big, but anyway, they're weird, and they kill one of them. The other guy, he escapes, and he goes towards that little town where the sheriff and the other main characters in the movie are, and he buries the bag that he stole one of these people's bags, and he put everything he stole in the bag, into the bag, and then he buries it. Well, he goes into the bar, because they have one little bar, and then after he leaves, he gets, oh no, wait a minute, no, that's right, there's a bunch of other stuff that happens, but anyway.
Yeah, like, you can't just explain the whole movie.
I don't want to explain, but anyway, it's...
Damn you.
What happens is...
That's not a review.
Some people get killed, and they am kidnapped, and one of them was like the town doctor, who's a woman, which is weird. Of course, you had that show that was on TV with Jane Seymour, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, so I guess it's not too weird to have a woman doctor.
Well, you know, even if the doctor was a man, you could technically say, you know, well, it was the 1800s, so maybe he identified as a woman in private.
Oh, God. So, anyway, she gets kidnapped along with the bad guy who went through that ceremonial graveyard, and some other guy who was the deputy sheriff, I believe. And they get kidnapped. So the rest of this little group, which includes Kurt Russell, they go after him. But first they have to find out where they are and who they are, and they find out from that guy who plays Joe Leaphorn in the new Tony Hillerman series, and who was on Fargo, and who was on...
Yeah, he's in something, Safi.
He's in all kinds of stuff.
He's in something.
And
like,
he said,
wow.
these people, you couldn't... They're not human. You can't defeat them. And they're like... That's what makes this a scary show, and that's not a typical Western. This group of Native Americans...
These are not Native Americans.
No, they're really like...
They're like
mythological alien creatures.
It's like the X-Files.
Well,
and so that's why when people call this movie racist and pretend like it's racist because the villains are like Native Americans...
But they're not,
it's like,
really.
No, that's the whole point, is that they're not like Native Americans. Like, people who say that, like, don't even watch the movie, because that's the whole point. And the movie was so good, because we got to start reviewing the movie. You know, this isn't a explanation fest.
No, I'm trying to figure out what to say.
Well, say something. Like, say anything.
Well, like I said, the movie, the first part of the movie dragged.
You like the sex scene.
No, I thought that was stupid. And
why?
It was just stupid and unnecessary.
But why is it unnecessary? Because of your sensibilities?
No, it's stupid. It just doesn't belong there.
Why?
Anyway,
Where does it belong, Safi?
it just doesn't belong. It
Why?
doesn't have any relevance to...
But it does, because it's a scene in the movie that the person put in the script. And so...
So what? So anyway...
Safi, you don't even know how to write.
Be quiet. The second part of the movie basically is the best part.
Yeah.
And what was funny is one of the husband of the doctor is part of the what would you call it, the reconnaissance, the party to go after these his wife and the other two people who were taken. And it was the sheriff, and then this guy who was a killer, and he dressed real nicely. He rode a beautiful white horse, he had a telescope, which they called the German. That was
Safi.
one other thing about this show. They had really interesting quotes and labels for things that they were creative.
Safi,
What?
review the movie.
Okay,
Stop,
I'm just
stop
not
copping
gonna,
out.
I can't help it.
It's
My
a cop
throat's
out.
bothering me.
It's a cop out. You know it.
I wish Marco would quit giving me the business.
Because you're
It's
not doing
driving
a
me-
review. You're just explaining the movie.
Well, I have to.
You have to actually
explain
say
something.
like what you thought.
So the
like,
second part of the movie, where they're going after whatever these creatures are, and trying to find their
Explain it.
friends and family,
oh really?
is the best part of the movie because it moves along.
Yeah.
And the the two people I least expected to make it, because the husband had broken his leg and he was actually supposed to be convalescing, meaning keeping it, not walking on it, and resting, and he's not going to let some, whatever they are, weirdos take his wife and not try to get her back. So he insists on going. Well, he is in such a disadvantage. They have horses. The horses get taken away. I mean, you just don't think he's going to be the one least likely to survive. The second guy, who I thought would be the least likely to survive, would be, well, the other deputy sheriff, who was kind of like a substitute. He's a lot older man.
The doctor.
And he was not
Another
really.
doctor, or was he a?
I think he was a doctor in the Civil War.
He was just
like a medic.
Yeah, so he survives, and so the
Yes.
people who, you'd think would be the weakest, they survive because they're the smartest.
Yeah, they're very smart. And the guy who was, I mean, they were talking about cutting off his leg, and I mean, it looked pretty dire, and they actually had to leave him behind, but they decided they would leave a trail of rocks to mark where they were going, and in case he got better, they had some medicine they could give him so he could sleep and and not do anything, give his leg a rest.
There was also there were multiple parts in the movie, because
Yeah.
you did make a little bit of commentary, maybe commentary for a 4-year-old standard.
Oh God.
You kept on saying where's the actual predators, like the coyotes and the lions and the bears and the rhinoceroses and stuff like that? Where are the real predators? The
coyotes,
where
wolves.
Where are the aliens from Area 51? Why aren't they running out here to kill them?
Well, that was
kept on
another
saying
thing. They
that.
leave the guy because he had fallen, he'd hurt his leg, and they had to reset it, meaning they had to re-break it. I mean, that was gross in itself. And so they had to give him some, I think it was opium, so he would go to sleep. And so, here they have cougars, they have wolves, they have coyotes, and you're thinking, my God, he's on the ground, and he's not really protected, and it's just...
I guess he has his little gun.
He has a gun, but I mean, he's still at a disadvantage.
Thank God it didn't get it taken away from him.
Right.
Right, Safi?
Yeah, so...
By that guy from Unforgiven?
But that was interesting how the weakest people were the smartest, strong ones.
Yeah.
They kept hearing these... As they got closer to these weird mythological beings, they would hear this strange noise, and it sounded like a
Kind of sounded
whistling.
like you. It sounded like you in the
Where-
morning when you're making your uji, and I get up to go to the bathroom, and you're like...
Marco's making up stories as we do this. I don't know
It's
what
true.
he's talking about.
That's what you sound like, and you're stirring the bowl, and that's what you sound like.
So anyway, what this guy who I thought he wasn't going to make it right away. I mean, even more than the older guy, because the older guy just didn't have enough maneuverability, but he was smart, like Marco said, and that helped them. He discovered that these beings, because a couple of them tried to attack him, and he got them. and he discovered it looked like where he was attacked in his throat, that he was wearing some kind of jewelry, and it was this whistle. It's embedded into their throats, and so if you blow on it, it calls. It's a warning call or beckoning call to the others. They don't talk; they whistle. That was another thing that was unusual. So there's a lot of, like, there's just a lot of quotes like, I'm not sulking, I'm sour, which was like, what the heck is that supposed to mean? And then the older guy, he's the one that saw the thief, killer, bury that bag under a tree because he was on a night ramble. So I mean, like, I don't know where they came up with these quotes. And then the girl at the beginning, she says to her husband, because he had to elevate his leg, she says, I buy pillows because they're pretty. I mean, they're just really weird stuff. And then
well, I think that the writing's really good.
Well, yeah,
and
it's
I think
different and creative.
The guy who made this movie, he's one of the better filmmakers of the modern era.
Mm.
And the movies he makes are so much better than most of the stuff that comes out. Like, there's another movie of his that you could watch with Vince Vaughn.
Oh.
And it's a very good movie.
Really?
Although it has the ending is a little bit I don't know. I never like movies that end with the main characters dying, because it's just like, okay, that's 2 hours that is a waste of time. Like, I want at least somebody to survive that's like an interesting character, at least. And in this movie, you have Patrick Wilson, and you have the old guy and the wife, and they survive. And I thought that was good, because I didn't think anyone would survive, except for maybe Safi, because she has to, so she can do a review.
Well, the thing is, when he discovered that whistle, and he realized they only communicated that way. They didn't talk at all. They just whistled. And it was this really long, loud, eerie noise. It was really a scary noise, a weird noise, so weird it just freaked you out. He realized he could bring them to himself and kill them, because they would be coming to the aid of their friend, because he thought it was them whistling. That was gross too. It had blood all over it, and he put it in his mouth.
The only thing is, like, it would have been interesting if we had gotten to know what he said by whistling. Like, they must have come up with some language of whistling, and, you whistle a certain way, like this and this and this.
Oh, yeah.
Then you say this. Like, it would have been interesting if they had added subtitles, and it would say, like, troglodyte language. He is saying, "You ate my Chinese dinner." Like, that would have been pretty funny.
But what was interesting, though, that the guy discovered this, and he could use it to their advantage, even though he was at an extreme disadvantage with his broken leg, which was healing, and he used that to save their lives.
It's kind of like a metaphor for your reviewing. Like, you're always at this big disadvantage because...
Well, another thing is the girl, they had not done anything to her, but they had killed the guy, of course, who went through the graveyard.
Yeah, which I was
like
really
I said,
glad.
I knew that was going to happen.
I mean, Safi, you're saying you didn't like the sex scene, but what's good about the sex scene is that, usually in these types of movies, there's one woman that gets raped at some point in the movie. And I'm glad that nobody ever gets assaulted in the movie.
No, she just they just have her captive.
Because it's like, I don't really like those types of movies. Like, they're always like, it seems like they just do that because it's a cheap thing to do.
Yeah, an easy thing, the easy way out, I guess. But another thing is, another helpful thing that helped them survive, who was left anyway, was the fact that she had counted the people who were involved, and so every time they knocked somebody off the count. So let's say there's 12 people, they knock somebody out. There's 11, and they could see the bodies along the way that they actually defeated, and so they just started counting down, and so that was another thing that was helpful to their survival.
And I would like to see a sequel. I would like to see Bone Tomahawk 2. Because...
Well, they did have they said there were 2 pregnant women.
Yeah.
So...
And what I would like is, instead of making these shitty-ass Avatar movies that nobody wants, like with the stupid blue people, let's make Bone Tomahawk 2, because I want to see more of the troglodytes.
Yeah, but that's the only thing. I don't like the name they gave them. I mean...
Why?
Because I just don't believe that people
what would
back
you like
in
to call them?
those days would even know that word.
If they called them savages, then they would get called racist.
But they call... Yeah, I know.
Because it's like, oh, well, if you call them savages, then, oh, well, did you know that Native Americans got called that? And it's like, who cares? It's a fucking movie.
That's right. He's the one that said the word.
What?
The man who was in Fargo, and
yeah,
he's the one that said the word first, right?
I think so.
He said there was this group they called them troglodytes.
Yeah.
It's just, I just don't, but I don't, it's really hard. I don't know what you would call them.
I would just like a full movie of the troglodytes just doing what they want to do. And it's
and they're also cannibals.
See, look, it's a metaphor
That's
for...
important, too.
It's not a metaphor for Native Americans. It's a metaphor for good movies.
Well, it's just a different kind of horror movie. Horror movies, sometimes, a lot of times, they can be formulaic. There's one it girl at the end.
Yeah, the final girl movies.
Oh, the final girl.
Like X.
And so it almost transcends into
Barbarian.
every single movie. They have the similar storylines, but different characters.
Boring formula, boring characters.
This is a completely different setting.
Terrifier 2 be another one.
Oh, God.
Gross.
So this is a different setting, and it's a cowboy movie.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, is Westworld, I've never seen that series, but is that supposed to be like a horror?
No, Safi, Westworld is for retards.
Marco, don't say that.
It's true. Just don't even talk about Westworld.
Well, anyway, it isn't the usual setting. So you just have different things. I thought that was very creative, that they had whistles embedded into their throats, and that's how they communicated, through this whistling. There's no language, speech.
It's almost like you wish you could do that. Like you think that...
No.
What, do you think that people should do that?
Marco. So anyway,
even
though the first part of the movie kind of dragged, there was a lot of good things about it.
Well,
and I would recommend it. The sex scene comes at the very beginning, and it doesn't last a long time.
Yeah, it's so hilarious because Safi, this is how much you can tell that she's full of shit, is because she cares more about there being a sex scene in the movie.
I'm thinking about other people that they do care about stuff like that. I'm just warning them.
Then a scene near the end of the movie where somebody gets chopped in half.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The violence. And
like you care more about people having pretend sex, which they're not even fully naked in the scene. They're only like halvesies because the rest is covered. And you care more about that than a fully naked man getting chopped in half.
Yeah, they show that. Anyway, that kind of, but they're cannibals.
This is the priorities of modern film audiences.
I'm just warning other people who care about it.
There's 2 people who are naked. It's so much more disturbing than when the guy got chopped in half and all of his bowels went all over the place and stuff. Like, that's just, we see that happen all the time. Right?
Okay, moving on.
And I would say too,
but I think it was a pretty good movie. I didn't think it was so bad, and I was glad I saw it.
And it would be really cool, I would say, for a sequel, if they moved it to modern day, because there are a lot of people that go missing in these desert areas with all these caves and there's one particular one that I'm thinking about. And they could have like a whole movie where people go to find like somebody who went missing in like a cave hiker or something, and then they come across the troglodytes.
Well, they just have...
That'd be pretty cool.
In real life,
Pretty cool.
they have this park, I don't know where it is, and there's a mountain, and they have 2 hikers were missing, and then another hiker who's an actor.
The guy from Rose Red.
He's from Rose Red?
Yeah, it was the British guy from Rose Red. Don't you remember?
Oh, you're kidding.
No, and guess what, Safi? We could have met him at that convention that we couldn't go to in the summer.
Okay, but that's really water under the bridge.
No, it's not.
But anyway, he's missing, and this place, they said that they're telling people to stay away. It's something about, well, of course, but you could turn it into this troglodyte kind of story. But
yeah, you could have a whole story about how his whole family's connected to the troglodytes, and it was all a big ruse for a family reunion.
yeah, well, anyway, this place, I can't remember where it is or what the name of it is, but apparently at this time of the year it's notorious because the weather, I guess they'll have a snowstorm and then it'll quickly turn to ice and people, they fall off the side of the mountain.
Well, speaking of ice, which is something that you could eat technically, which you're not supposed to, what would you rate Bone Tomahawk in terms of food?
Boy.
Oh, did you not think of that, Safi?
That's hard.
Okay, while you're thinking about your food review, I'll just keep talking about the movie. So, I would say, like, the fun thing about the movie is that it feels like it was written by a smart person.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like he did his research, and, like, he came up with all these questions of, like, what are they going to do about food and this and that. And it wasn't just, let's make a movie about people fighting bad guys in the desert. It was like an actual story, and it's really cool how it was made too, because it feels like this guy is one of the few people who actually makes good movies. Like this movie, it was much better than anything that came out in 2022. Wouldn't you say, Safi? Like,
oh yeah. Definitely.
A million times better. Like, even the Top Gun Part 2. This was way better. Because it was more adult.
And it was different, too.
And it was original.
Different. It was very original, creative. That's one thing I really like.
And it didn't have Tom Cruise, which is always a plus.
He's nominated for Academy Award.
No, he's not.
I think he is.
No, he was snubbed. According to people.
I thought he was nominated, but anyway. No. I thought it was very creative, and I guess I would give it some broccoli cheddar soup because it's not, broccoli, if you just have broccoli cheddar soup, maybe for most people that isn't good enough. I usually get it at Panera Bread, and I get a piece of bread with it. And it's not a whole piece of bread, it's kind of like a part. And so, like I said, this movie, the first half was kind of sluggish, although it did set the characters.
Before they leave town. That's the first half of the movie.
Why they left town, what happened, and it was dragged out a little bit. And I guess another failing with it, I just thought of it, was the horses. Apparently they stole a bunch of horses, including a small, like a baby. They called it a colt. Now, that would indicate to me it was a baby, a young, very, very young horse.
I think they ate them all.
Well, that's what I thought, but boy, they really ate them fast.
Yeah, well, they were hungry.
I'll say.
They like to eat. That's their whole deal. They're like a Texas Chainsaw family, except they don't have people who talk or anything.
Right.
Or Leatherface.
Okay. So, but anyway, it's not really, when you have a little cup of soup and piece of bread, it's not really a whole meal, but it's good enough for me. And that's kind of like what this movie was. It was good enough. Even though, like I said, the first part dragged, but they still had to do the setting of the characters, the place, and you get under this mistaken impression, like I said, that the weakest people aren't really the weakest people. They're actually the smartest people, and they actually saved the lives of everybody who's left.
And speaking of broccoli cheddar soup, the story of broccoli cheddar at Panera Bread is kind of funny, because we have Panera Bread farther away from us, well, like in the mall area, for like 1,000,000 years, and we only went there like twice, and we didn't like going there because their sandwiches sucked and they were all overpriced.
Yeah, I don't ever eat sandwich.
Pretty much everywhere now is overpriced now.
Yeah, they've all raised their prices,
and
we know
for no reason, and they give lesser food too. Like yesterday, we went and I got some chips and cheese, and they only
Taco Bell,
and they only gave me like half a little bag, and it's like it's already a little tiny bag.
Mm-hmm.
But they only gave half a bag. They only give half a thing of sauce, and it's like, this isn't the apocalypse. This isn't a fucking like nuclear war. Like it's 2023. But we never went to Panera Bread. But instead, there was a place called Tim Hortons, and of course, you guys have already heard 1,000,000 times the story of the Tim Hortons flu, aka the
coughing disease.
The COVID Junior.
Pre-COVID, yeah.
Yeah. The beta COVID that they released before. But we went there like every week to get broccoli cheddar soup. I would get like a half a sandwich or something, and then they had this really delicious pumpkin drink. And that's what I would rate the movie probably in terms of food, because that was a really solid meal, and it felt like, this place is pretty underrated, Tim Hortons. And then they did that thing with the flu, where they gave us a horrible sickness that lasted like 6 months.
It went on and on.
And then after that, they stopped serving broccoli cheddar soup, and they took it completely off the menu.
Oh.
And they've basically gutted the entire Tim Hortons menu except for like breakfast stuff.
Yeah, they have lots of good donuts.
They still have like this limited menu, but like nobody goes there anymore. Like every time we go by there, it's like depressing because there's nobody that goes there except for like one person. And it's like, it's just so like pathetic that they ruined it. Like they could have had a really popular restaurant, but then Panera Bread opened up right next to it. Another Panera Bread, and we started going there, and they're overpriced as hell, but wow, like their soup is good, they give you a little bread with it, and so now we go there all the time.
Week. Oh, at least about once a week.
So that's pretty funny that like now we go to Panera Bread because Tim Hortons shit the bed. But Bone Tomahawk never did anything bad to anyone, so Bone Tomahawk's good.
It's just if you want to see a different kind of horror movie, try it out.
And the next movie that Safi will be forced to watch will be ... American Beauty.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Blech.
Speaking of nakedness, with the roses.
Oh, well.
You never forget the roses, did you?
No, I can't. The rose petals.
You
right?
love the roses, yeah. Because it's a metaphor for the movie.
Oh, it's a boring movie.
Bullshit, Safi.
Well, we'll see.
We'll have a fight.
We'll watch it tomorrow.
Okay, well.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.